Hi, I'm Joe Coffey here for PremierGuitar.com. We're in Nazareth, Pennsylvania at the Martin Factory, and we're actually about to go in and look at the Martin Museum. I've got Dick Boak with me here. Dick, how are you?
Great, Joe.
I'm excited about this. What are we going to look at today?
Well, we're going to look at the history of American culture as it weaves through America's finest guitar maker, Martin Guitars.
Let's do it.
C.F. Martin Sr., our founder, grew up in a small town of Markneukirchen on the border of the Czech Republic. This is a picture of Markneukirchen. And at the age of 15, his father, who was a woodworker, sent him off to Vienna to study under Johann Stauffer, who was the greatest guitar maker of the day, kind of the Martin guitars of that era. And during that time period, Martin learned all the jobs and rose to the level fairly quickly, foreman of the shop. So this guitar, which is the oldest guitar in our collection, is an actual Stauffer before the Martin Guitar Company. A Stauffer made in Vienna, probably under the supervision of C.F. Martin Sr., roughly 1820. You see that the headstock has friction pegs made of wood, like a violin. Down here, these tuning machines were very new to that time period. Metal tuning gears were used on a headstock that had this little curlicue, which is what eventually Leo Fender copied off of Martin for his Fender guitars. This is the oldest guitar that we have in our collection that's an actual Martin. This was built in 1834, and that would be extremely early because Martin arrived in New York Harbor on November 6th of 1833. So it would be one of the very first guitars that he made here in the United States. And if you look in through the mirror, you can see that the back of the neck is made with contrasting strips of ivory and ebony. It's just a beautiful, beautiful high level of craftsmanship that was really what Martin was all about. During this time period, all the guitars came with cases which are referred to as coffin cases. Martin made these himself. And in New York City, where his shop was, by the way, his shop was right near the mouth of the Holland Tunnel. And this was a German-speaking area, but they were very unhappy in New York City. And C.F. Martin's wife, Ottilia, came to Nazareth and visited friends in Nazareth, and this was a German-speaking town. It was a town that was closed off to anyone except for Moravians. But nonetheless, she went back and read the riot act to CF and said, "We're moving to Nazareth, Pennsylvania." So after 6 years in New York City, he sold all of his goods, all of his music store items, and moved to Nazareth. Now, as I mentioned, they couldn't live right in town because they weren't Moravians. So they settled just north of town in Cherry Hill, which is really only several hundred yards from where we're standing right now. So between the dates of 1839 and 1859, he thrived as an instrument maker, no longer running a music store. And the guitars began to take on specific styling.
I noticed the mustache bridge is gone by this point.
That's right. And most of the curlicue headstocks are gone too, because an interruption in trade forced Martin to redesign the headstock into what is now the kind of the classic shaker style headstock, and the tuning machines were made in Boston by an outfit that Martin found up there to do the job. But here, the model numbers start to take shape. The prefix, here we have a 3-17. This is a size 3 guitar selling for $17. And down here we have a 2-24. That's a size 2 guitar selling for $24. And so the suffix was the price. And naturally, even though inflation would eventually change that, the styling of each instrument became synonymous with the original number. So here we have a 1-28 with features that are really quite similar to a current D28. The guitars during this time period are still very, very small and used primarily in the parlor. Many women groups like Valda Bickford Alcott formed. As a matter of fact, probably 90% of the guitars that were sold were going out to women. Martin also did a lot of repair. This is a zither made by Martin, and a typical scenario would be that somebody would have an instrument made in Europe that was falling apart, bring it to Martin. He would take an interest in it and make replicas that were far more exceptional than the originals.
Now, these artifacts are priceless, really. What's involved with the upkeep and just, I see they're all strung. What's involved with keeping these in good condition?
Well, the humidity and temperature in the museum is kept perfect at about 48% and 68 degrees year-round. It's perfect scenario. There's very, very low lighting, cool lighting on these instruments. The cases are ventilated. And beyond that, there's very little stress put on the guitar from hanging, because they're actually resting on a little shelf which is supporting them. So the guitars are really in an ideal situation. I had a tremendous amount of fun putting this exhibit together, mostly from tools that I found under the eaves of the attic in North Street. Martin never threw anything away, and just some amazing things. The workbench dates to about 1850, but the toolbox is actually the exact toolbox that Martin brought with him from Germany. At the end of the 1800s, with the influx of Italian immigrants, the mandolin became very popular. And against the advice of Martin's distributor, Zobisch, Frank Martin, a very young Frank Martin, who had taken over after the death of his father, C.F. Martin Jr., decided, A, to fire Zobisch as a distributor and take on distribution himself, and B, to get big time into mandolins. So that's what happened, and he did a great job at it. Had a lot of success and built a lot of very beautiful bowl-back or potato bug mandolins.
Spruce tops, right?
Spruce tops with incredible Brazilian rosewood laminated with strips of thin ivory, hand scalloped, just beautiful craftsmanship. In the teens, as a result of a trade show where Hawaii had an exhibit, Hawaiian music and the ukulele became incredibly popular in the United States. Martin jumped in early on and actually defined the ukulele itself. The Martin ukuleles we're supposed to say ukulele, but the Martin ukuleles were the finest made, and soon thousands and thousands and thousands of ukuleles were being made at the Martin plant. So much so that it required that the North Street plant be expanded to be able to keep up with the production. Made more ukuleles than guitars for many, many years. So now you can see that the instruments are starting to grow in size. Size 5, size 4, size 3, size 2, size 1, each one getting a little bit bigger until they ran out of numbers and went to size 0, and then size 00 and size 000. Size 000, as you can see, is really the largest 12-fret guitar of its day, and a very powerful guitar. It's the instrument that Jimmy Rogers used and popularized in the early 20s as the father of country music. Ivory was used on most of the instruments for bridges and for bindings and sometimes for fingerboards, but gradually around the early 1900s, ivory was suspended from use for those parts. This is interesting. This is the Baby Ditson. Ditson was a company in New York and Boston, a very large music company, and they contracted with Martin to make special instruments. Martin made these instruments exclusively for Ditson. And Ditson asked that Martin make this particular guitar, which you'll notice has the dreadnought shape. It's just very tiny. So this is the predecessor of the dreadnought shape.